I do want to deal with the aged care report that was around today. It is too important to brush aside. Liz Tilley with the details on this. It's the interim report into the Royal Commission into aged care. This should shock people into genuine action, and it should shock people with access to a TV, camera or microphone to keep talking about it.
Unkind, underfunded, unacceptable. The Aged Care Royal Commission's interim report confirming the worst when it comes to the treatment of the nation's most vulnerable.
The Prime Minister warned us that we would hear some bad stories. What shocked us all has been the extent of that.
The draft report says it's uncovered a shocking tale of neglect, finding the aged care system is unkind and uncaring and one that diminishes Australia as a nation. Aged care services are underfunded, mostly poorly managed and fail to meet the needs of older citizens. The Commissioners are calling for immediate action when it comes to providing more home care packages, less use of chemical restraints and more help for young people in aged care. They're also demanding a fundamental overhaul of the design and regulation of the sector.
It puts governments on notice, it puts the industry on notice, and it puts the Australian community on notice that we need to change the way that we approach how we care for older Australians.
The final report is due for release late next year. Elizabeth Tilley, Sky News.
Now, apart from everything that's being mentioned in the report, I've got a few ideas. I'll get to those in a second. But Jenna, I want you to fire off first about this. What do you think of this report? And do we actually have the stamina to keep talking about this? Or is this just going to be tut-tut and, oh, look, a Kardashian over there?
God, I absolutely hope not. I think this is one of the most pressing issues that is not getting enough airtime or centimetres in newspapers around the country. And it's interesting, I mean, I'm not across how it would even work, but I know from my own personal experience, I have a grandparent that was in aged care, and ever since it sort of went into a more private, she went into a private aged care facility, and care for her went completely and utterly downhill because they're focused on profits instead of people. And these people are our most prized citizens. I mean, God, they gave us our country and they fought for everything that we have now, and they're our most vulnerable. We should be taking care of them. So I think Senator Colbeck needs to really stand up and take ownership of this, and it'd be interesting to see what he does with the findings moving forward when he puts it into policy. James,
do you think anything actually happens here?
Well, I think we're going to have to look at the amount of money we've got tied up in capital in this industry. At the moment, it's very difficult because we have essentially, you know, people pay to go in there, and that pool of capital is used for the expansion of the aged care system. But we perhaps need to be more flexible about how that money is used, and some of that money is going to have to be used on the care of the people who's in there. I think we're going to have a big debate about this. Otherwise, the bill from to the taxpayer of improving the standards of care in some of these places is going to be billions and billions.
See, there was an interesting series of observations today, and someone somewhere had mentioned that this was, in financial cost, potentially bigger than the NDIS, and we all know that that is an ever-growing, ever-expanding, multi-billion-dollar, sure, important thing to do, but essentially complicated drag on the budget. But there's a few kind of practical things that I hope start to come out of all of this, that all of us are appalled by examples of elder abuse. A potential solution to things like that would be technology exists now where you could have a camera in every single room, in every single aged care facility in the country. If the person who is in that room is okay with you, the family member, checking in and being able to look, then I think that's something that should happen. I think that in order to be able to have a licence, to have an aged care facility, you have to put some money into the pot for an immediate compensation scheme, not paid for by us, the public, but them, the provider, if an action of elder abuse takes place. These are just a few little slivers about the thing where, because what's happening now is part of the Right to Know campaign is that we don't know that a joint gets a ding until 6 months after it happens. It's a complicated system, I get it, but I think that we need to return to a fundamental decency and also a sense that abuse will be noticed, not ignored.
Well, Paul, 20 years ago, aged care was in a dreadful mess, and I cleaned it up then. And I closed a home. I cleaned out another 200 providers who were not up to it. There were 3,000 aged care facilities. There are now 2,700. There were 167,000 people who were in residential aged care with a population of 20 million people. There are now 200,000 people in aged care with 25 million people. Occupancy rates in residential care is going down because people want to be at home.
Of course.
Now, I'm the minister who brought in aged care packages to let people stay at home. So there's 125,000 people now waiting for an aged care package. So the whole thing has to be totally rethought. You're talking about 350,000 people approximately, 6,000 of which are young people. The problem with young people is, in aged care facilities, they'll make friendships and then they die. But if you try and put all those 6,000 people into a number of centralised bodies, who's going to visit them? Where's it going to be? 50% of people in aged care homes are there for dementia. 40% of people in residential aged care homes never have a visitor. Now, I was listening to Talkback as I was coming over today, and I heard someone say, I walk past a home every day. And I asked myself, I wonder if that person would think about going in and making a visit. One of the last things I was trying to do before I left that portfolio, and I think it needs to be done, was to set up something I wanted to call Carnation Day, when the population that lives around an aged care home would go and visit, make it their business to go in and actually talk to people. And really, there is a visitors program, but those things need to be done. But basically, what has to be done is homes have to be closed that cannot be, because they are past salvation point. And those people will lose millions of dollars.
Well, how will the industry, okay, when the minister inevitably starts to look and say, well, here's a line ball, no, how does the industry fight common sense that obviously that provider's not up to it, that house isn't up to it? How do they fight you?
I'll tell you how they fought me. They took me to court. I knew they'd take me to court. But I made sure that I acted completely in compliance with the law. And I won. And I won when they tried to get an interim injunction. And fortunately, the judge gave a good 3-page judgment. Once I closed it, everybody knew I meant business. And that's how we got rid of another 200.